Simon. It results in a kind of polarization of the spirit, an alignment of the psyche along certain lines that enable it to penetrate to the corners of human consciousness, corners where we once thought it was all flat plains. It is a pagan grimoire using an ancient language that has not been spoken in thousands of years. If there is such a thing as genetic memory, the incantations of the Necronomicon unlock segments of that memory that have been dormant for millennia. Walking the gates is also an ancient practice, as much revered in the Far East as the Middle East. It is a technology hardwired into our nervous systems, or perhaps even deeper at the cellular level. Without trying to sound too New Agey about it, walking the gates is a technology of transformation and growth, but it is an honest one, as full of danger as any real transformation, real growth must be. In nominandum, apart from your work with the Necronomicon, you were quite active in the NYC occult scene during the 70s and early 80s. Behutet has paid special interest to this place and time in occult history, and has done extended articles on both Herman Slater and Harry Smith. Are there any stories or insights you can share about the events of this period, such as the so-called witch wars that were waged between the Gardnerians, Welsh witches, and Alexandrians? Simon. Wow, that is a book in itself. I was there, of course, from the very beginning, when the Warlock Shop was a small little establishment in Brooklyn Heights. I was there the day it opened and met the indomitable Herman Slater at that time. I sincerely mourn his passing. I was one of the last to speak with him in the hospital. By phone, I was nowhere near New York at the time. Days before his death. He was a notorious gossip and delighted in causing trouble. But anyone who knew him understood that it was not malicious, but, well, mischievous might be the better word. In those days, the Gardnerians were in pole position, and I had already met Ray Buckland at his operation in Long Island. Later, I would meet many of the other high priests and priestess of the craft, while not actually joining the craft myself. I attended coven meetings all over New York, and eventually began to understand that the Gardnerian Book of Shadows was essentially a Golden Dawn manual mixed with elements of the OTO and a lot of poetry by Kipling. I admit I caused a bit of a stir when I handed one Gardnerian high priest a copy of poems taken from Kipling's Puck of Pook's Hill, poems which contained some of the Gardnerian invocations. The HP went ashen white and asked to be excused so he could make a few phone calls. There was a lot of magical attack going on in the period 1972 to 75, roughly. Different covens attacking each other, different sects attacking other sects. It was largely through Herman Slater's efforts that the various warring groups came together in the back of the Warlock Shop in Brooklyn Heights to hammer out their differences, and I was privileged to have been there for the public part of the proceedings. Herman had a knack for insulting everyone and thereby stripping them of their defenses and their egos enough so that they could start laughing and begin the process of healing. Herman had credentials, and people were forced to listen to him. He was gay, of course, and had photos of himself in drag, and was totally open about his sexuality. He also had suffered a bout of tuberculosis, which caused him to limp, and he had one eye which was always aimed in a different direction. But he had opened the Warlock Shop and made witchcraft and magic famous not only in New York — John Lennon and Yoko Ono were frequent customers — but around the world as well. He had something to say. And witches were spending more time attacking each other than attacking the common enemy: racism, sexism, fascism, religious bigotry. I believe Herman helped some of them to see that. The Welsh trads felt that they were more genuine as witches, because they were learning Welsh, I guess. Their Book of Shadows did not vary significantly from the Gardnerian, same pentagram rituals from the Golden Dawn, same poetry from Kipling, but they had a dress code. The Gardnerians were sky-clad, a term taken from Hindu mysticism, by the way. The Alexandrians were another culture entirely, formed entirely around the personality of its founder, Alex Saunders, and more devoted to elaborate ritual magic and a self-conscious wooing of the media. It was perhaps inevitable that the groups had conflicts. There was also a difference in culture between the groups. I remember that the Gardnerians on Long Island, not Ray or Rosemary Buckland, but some of their inductees, were pretty aggressively blue-collar. I imagined them holding circles in hot tubs. Imagined the Sopranos as witches. They were anti-intellectual for the most part, as were many Wiccans then, and looked down at the Welsh trads for being stuck up emotionally, or sexually, or something. Sort of holier than thou. The Alexandrians were considered effete and borderline Christian. And then, of course, there was Leo Martello and his Italian strega tradition. It was all very amusing. I had fun. There is so much to that period, so many personalities and events, that I am tongue-tied for the moment. Perhaps in the next few days I will think of something more profound to say, or come up with some more anecdotes. Aenomenandum. You mention all the magical attack going on. To your knowledge, was the Necronomicon ever used for this purpose? Simon. Oh yeah, sure. But in very few cases, actually, and a bit later than 1975. I am thinking of 1977 to 78. People still tended to be frightened of the book and of using it, incorrectly. It had the aura of being so dark, so powerful when used in a normal way, that to incorporate it in a magical attack seemed virtually suicidal. However, as we all know, there were many who were so addicted to that type of extreme experience and so consumed by hatred of their enemies that they dared to use the book for that purpose. Let us say that the fallout was normally not worth the effort. It was an occult case of mutually assured destruction, particularly when one did not perform the walking of the gates prior to using the book as an engine of attack. In one case, the watcher was used as what the witches refer to as a fetch. The magician sent the watcher to frighten an opponent. Both were equally affected by the ritual, both suffered. The watcher has no sense of humor. Aenomenandum. I have heard stories of a certain lodge master of the OTO developing severe paranoia regarding the book and the people working it that eventually caused him to leave the order and become a fundamentalist Christian. Any truth to this rumor? Simon. As far as I know, this seems to be an amalgamation of several individuals. One in particular was quite paranoid about the book, but I don't believe he was a lodge master. He did eventually leave the order, but I believe he became a Scientologist. So, he did not leave the order entirely. But all of this happened after I extricated myself from the scene. Aenomenandum. The Necronomicon report was republished as the Necronomicon Spellbook in 1987. This was supposed to be published with a second book called The Gates of the Necronomicon. Whatever happened to this book? Simon. Ah, the famous Gates of the Necronomicon. That book was written and handed over to Herman Slater. I understand it was set in type and prepared for printing, but disappeared after Herman's death. I have no clue what happened to it, although I did see it once advertised briefly and then disappear again. If anyone has any clues as to its whereabouts, I would love to know.